He said my name like it mattered. "Lena," he said, clipping the syllables clean, as if he tested their weight on his tongue before he offered them to me. We were at our friend Alif's birthday dinner. 8 people squeezed into a too-small booth that made everyone's knees touch. The server kept balancing plates over shoulders, sizzling shrimp, buttered naan, lemon water beading with sweat, and I kept pretending my heart didn't jump each time his sleeve brushed my arm. He was Rayan to everyone else. To me, that night, he was just the tall stranger who offered me the last piece of garlic butter bread and smiled like he already knew I would say no and take it anyway. I did. We laughed about it, and then we kept laughing, through candles and photos and the cake that leaned left like it had lost an argument with gravity. When his hand hovered over my back as we squeezed out of the booth, I felt something rare and bright move through me, like someone had switched on a light inside a locked room. On the sidewalk, wind tugged at my hair. He watched the strands lift and fall like dark ribbon. "Can I walk you to your car?" he asked. I pointed across the street. "It's right there." "Then let me walk you." "Across the street," he said, as if the distance mattered less than the promise of it. We stood by my car longer than strangers should. He asked real questions, favorite books, the worst day of my week, the best kind of rain. He listened like the answers were clues to something he wanted to build. When he finally said goodnight, he said my name again. "Good night, Lena." And I drove home with my windows down, and the city wind loud enough to make me feel like I was already in some movie about love that works out. I should tell you now that I believed in good endings back then. The kind with kisses in doorways and hands you could trust. I should also tell you that I met her, Maya, the same night. She was there too, laughing from the far end of the table, her bracelets clacking like a quiet bell. She hugged me goodbye. She smelled like grapefruit and something floral. We traded numbers. She said, "We should get coffee this week. I've seen you around and I like your vibe." I said yes without any sense of foreboding because why would I? I didn't know I'd be measuring my life in before Maya and after Maya. Not yet. That night, I drove home replaying the way he had said my name. I didn't know there would come a day he would say it like an apology. Rayan didn't vanish. He texted the next morning, a simple message that made me smile in an elevator with strangers. "Did you know garlic bread tastes like regret when you don't share?" "Coffee later?" We were good at the beginning. Isn't that how it always starts? It felt like stepping onto a moving walkway. Effortless. We found routines without naming them. Saturday mornings meant the farmer's market. He bought tomatoes like they were precious. I bought flowers and pretended it wasn't because I wanted our apartment to smell like possibility. We didn't live together, but we carved space inside each other's calendars until it felt almost the same. When he told me about his mother's habit of saving rubber bands in a ceramic jar, I told him about my father's silence on long drives. When I admitted I hated crowds because I'd once panicked in a stadium at 16 and couldn't find the exit, he admitted he texted himself reminders like buy batteries, call dentist, call Lena. The third one earned him a kiss. He laughed with his head thrown slightly back, like laughter unlocked something at the base of his skull. I loved that first. Then I loved how he folded shirts and hummed under his breath while he worked and learned every single traffic shortcut in my neighborhood. I loved that he noticed when my nail polish chipped and made a joke about battle scars. I loved his questions, which told me he was curious about me in a way that felt rare. Maya and I began texting too. Coffee turned into long walks. She'd point at a stranger's shoes and make up a life for them. "Those are Heartbreak shoes," she'd say. And by the end of the block, we'd decided the woman wearing them had just left someone at an airport. It was easy with Maya. She was quick and present and good at cutting through noise. When she asked how Rayon was, I told her everything gentle, everything golden. In the small life we built, I noticed only the light. The first hairline crack arrived quiet as a whisper. It was a Tuesday. Rayon texted to say he had a late meeting. I told him to come by after. I'd make tea. We could watch that documentary he liked about a piano tuner who could hear frequencies others couldn't. By 9, he wasn't there. At 10, he sent a selfie. Bad office lighting, tie loosened. "Running late. Rain check?" "Of course," I wrote back. Because of course is what you text when you want to be generous and easy. The good girlfriend who understands work. I set the tea in the sink and heard the hollow sound the cups made. At midnight, a different message arrived from Maya. "Are you up?" I was. She called. I imagined pajamas, a stack of books on her nightstand, her bracelets in a dish. "Stupid question," she said. "But you know that ramen place on 6th? Is it still open?" "Not at midnight," I said, laughing. "Why?" "Craving." "Never mind. Go to sleep." "Love you." We hung up. I stared at the screen a long time, not yet connecting threads that didn't look like threads. There were other moments, tiny and almost nothing. Rayon learning to make the exact omelet I liked, and then, one day the pan still on the stove, the egg burned at the edge because he'd stepped into the hall to take a call. Rayon forgetting the name of my 6th grade teacher after he'd known it for months. Rayon canceling a Sunday hike because he was fried. We all get fried. It meant nothing. And yet, one Saturday at the market, I saw the tomato man, a guy who spoke like the produce were children, lean over his stand and say, "Back again?" To Rayon, we hadn't been that week. Rayon's smile was automatic. He paid in cash. Later on the drive home, he talked about a new project, his hands describing arcs in the air like he was building something made of light. "Who were you with?" I asked, gentle. "Tomato guy recognized you." "A leaf," he said. "Last minute." We grabbed coffee. I nodded. It was small. We drove on, but my body remembered the tomato guy's back again, like a stone in my shoe. Sometimes hairline cracks are only hairline cracks. Sometimes they run through an entire wall. I wasn't trying to catch anyone. I wasn't even suspicious that night. I was just early. Maya had introduced me to a new gallery downtown. White walls, soft laughter, everyone holding wine as if it was part of an art installation. "Come with me Thursday," she'd said. "I want to show you this sculpture that looks like a wave frozen mid-rage." Rayon had a team dinner that night. We promised to trade notes afterward. I arrived 15 minutes early, the sky dark like velvet. My phone buzzed with a work email. I was walking and reading as the gallery doors whooshed open. I looked up, thumb still on the screen, and saw him. Not Rayan. Him, and Maya, stepping out of the gallery like they were surfacing from water, air shocked and bright around them. Her bracelet clacked. His tie was gone. They didn't see me. They were turned in toward each other. The kind of body language you learn is intimacy only after you've experienced it yourself. I froze. Not from drama, from math. I was still calculating. What time is it? He said team dinner. She said gallery. What is this? My stomach dropped in slow motion. Maya laughed low. Rayan's smile was wide and soft, the one I knew. He reached out, absent-minded, to tuck a strand of hair behind her ear. Easy, natural, and I felt the world tilt. It was a gesture I knew by heart because I'd known it on my face. They didn't kiss. They didn't touch the way you would point to in a court and say Exhibit A. They didn't need to. Every small motion between them was a sentence I couldn't unknow. I stood there as they walked past the tall hedge that framed the entrance. Rayan took out his phone. I watched him type. My phone buzzed a second later. Dinner running long. How's the wave? I felt sick. They turned the corner. I realized I had been holding my breath. The gallery guard tilted his head at me. You coming in? Yeah, I said, voice splintering. Just a minute. I didn't go inside. I stepped to the side and called Maya. She answered on the second ring. Her voice was the one she used when she was holding something she didn't want to break. Hey, you here? She asked. I'm outside, I said. Where are you? A beat. Not long. Barely there. Running late, she said. Be there in 5. The word late hit like glass shattering in a small room. I just saw you, I said. With him, silence. A few seconds that felt like a decade. Then the sound of the night around her. Car doors. Distant music. She didn't hang up. She didn't deny. When she spoke, her voice was softer than I'd ever heard it. Lena, she said. Just my name, like a confession. I waited for her to tell me I'd misunderstood. But there are some shapes you know by their shadow. Come back, I said, because I didn't know what else to say. Please come back, she did. 2 minutes later, she rounded the hedge, alone. The wind lifted her hair, and it struck me, with a bright, cruel clarity, that she was beautiful. Not in the way I felt I had to compete with, but in the way that made her her. She stood a foot away. I wanted to step into that foot of space and shake her, or hug her. Both. Neither. How long? I asked. Her eyes shone. A few weeks. Pain has a temperature. Mine dropped. The night got cold. Why? I asked. Because you ask, even when you already know the answers. Proximity, chemistry, lines blurred by secrets. The kind of familiarity that grows when someone knows your first draft of a thought. You ask because you want the universe to come down and draw a circle around the facts. Maya swallowed. Her lips trembled the way lips do when truth is begging. I begged it not to happen, she said. And then it did. And then it kept happening. And I kept saying I was going to stop. And then I didn't. I couldn't breathe. Heat flushed my face, then left. I thought of the tomato guy saying, "Back again?" and wanted to laugh and scream. "Does he love you?" I asked, despite myself. "I don't know," she said. "I think he—" She stopped. "No, I don't know." Something in me broke in a quiet way, like a thread that had been holding beads, and suddenly there were beads everywhere, rolling impossible paths. Rayon texted again. "You okay?" The words blurred. I lifted my head. "You are my friend," I said. "You were supposed to be my friend." "I know," Maya whispered. "I hate me." I didn't say I hated her. I didn't say anything. I walked away. That night, I didn't sleep. I made tea I didn't drink. I watched the sun put light on buildings it had never betrayed. At 7:12 a.m., Rayon texted, "Can I come over?" I didn't answer. At 7:18, he texted again, "Please." I put my phone face down and sat on the floor because somehow the floor felt safer than a chair. By 7:30, he was knocking on my door. I opened the door because I needed it to end. Rayon stood there with that smile he used for strangers, the polite one, before his expression broke and his eyes searched mine. He must have seen it. I knew. He stepped in slowly, like we were both walking into a church. "Lena," he began. But I lifted my hand, palm up, and he stopped. I sat. He sat across from me. We looked at each other like explorers comparing maps that wouldn't match. I spoke first. "How long?" He didn't insult me by pretending. His voice was hoarse. "A few weeks." The words landed like pebbles at the bottom of a well. "Why?" I asked, because I had to hear his version too. He rubbed his face. She... He swallowed. "It started with your birthday surprise. Remember the video she helped me cut? We stayed up late. We were tired and stupid and I thought it was just a moment. But then it wasn't a moment. It was another moment. And then I couldn't stop thinking about her. And I hated that I couldn't stop thinking about her because I love you." The sentence was a fist and an open hand. "You love me?" I asked. "Stare steady. And her?" He shook his head fast. "I don't know if I love her. He looked at me, helpless. "I want to love you, and only you." "Wanting isn't doing," I said, and a muscle in his jaw jumped. "Did you ever plan to tell me?" "Yes," he said too fast. "No, I don't know. I kept telling myself I would stop, that it was stress, confusion, that it would burn itself out. Every time I saw you, I thought, I can't ever hurt her like this again. And then you did," I said. He flinched like I'd struck him. "I'm a coward." "You're a liar," I said, not unkindly. He nodded like he deserved every name I gave him. Silence filled the room, dense as fog. Somewhere, 2 floors up, a radio played a song about rescue. "What do you want?" I asked finally, because sometimes the simplest question is the sharpest knife. He swallowed. His eyes were red. "I want to fix this." "That's not an answer," I said, my voice steady now. "That's an instinct." He put his face in his hands and took a breath so long I thought he would drown in it. When he lifted his head, he looked older. "I want to be with you," he said. Then quiet. "And I can't stop thinking about her." That was the moment the room shifted. It wasn't the betrayal. It wasn't even that it had been my friend. It was the honesty finally blooming like a bruise. He wanted me. He wanted her. He was the kind of person who, when faced with a cliff, wanted to step off it to see if he could fly. I stood. My hands shook. "I'm not a bridge you walk over to see if the other side feels better," I said. "I'm not a placeholder." He stood too. "You're not. You're—" He didn't have the word. "I'm sorry." "I know," I said, "but that doesn't change what you've done." He reached for me and stopped himself. "Tell me what to do." "You already know," I said. "You knew the moment you let it happen." We stood there, a foot apart, more distance than miles. I watched his face as he arrived at the truth I had already reached. There are choices you make that you can't make and keep the life you had. He closed his eyes. When he opened them, the answer was in them. "I think I choose her," he said, so quietly that a person outside the door wouldn't have heard. I felt nothing for a second. Then I felt everything. Heat rose to my throat and then drained away. I heard my own breath, and the 3 words echoed through my bones like a bell tolling noon. He chose her over me. Sometimes you think heartbreak will be a single crack like a gunshot. Mine was 1,000 tiny cracks all at once, like ice under weight finally giving way. I could have begged. I could have asked him to try, to pick me, to remember our market tomatoes and the sci-fi movies we'd ruined with jokes, the quiet that felt like a prayer. But I am my father's daughter in one way. When I know a thing, I know it. And he had chosen. I nodded. It was nothing like forgiveness. It was just acknowledgement of gravity. "Then go," I said, "and don't come back to check if I'm okay. Let me be not okay without you." He stared at me like I had struck him again. "Please," he said, but he didn't know what he was asking for. A rewrite? A gentler ending? "Go," I repeated. He went. The door closed soft. The radio 2 floors up changed songs. The sun climbed like it did on every other day. I sank to the floor again, and finally, I cried. There is a sound grief makes only when you're alone. A small keening thing that doesn't want to be witnessed. I let it out. Then I cleaned the counters. It wasn't penance. It was a way to remind myself that the world had corners and edges I could put in order. I put his toothbrush in a bag. I folded his t-shirt he kept here, the one with the faded college logo, and put it on top. I unplugged the charger he always left in the second outlet. If you had asked me if I was okay, I would have laughed until something broke. People think heartbreak is all lying in bed and listening to sad music. There is that. But there's also calling your landlord to ask if you can swap parking spaces because the one you have looks at his building. There's also buying a different brand of tea because the first brand tastes like his laugh. Maya texted me once. I'm so sorry. I don't deserve your forgiveness. I'm not asking for it. I'm sorry. I didn't answer. There was nothing she could say that would stitch the wound she'd made. Nothing that didn't sound like walking backwards. I told 2 people. My brother, who listened without interrupting and said, "Text me at 2 a.m. If you need, I'll answer." And my coworker Nadia, who brought me soup and didn't ask me to explain anything. The rest of my life I kept moving like normal. It's American to pretend you're fine. It's also human. You wear the same face to buy milk as you wore to get kissed. At night, I typed messages I didn't send. I hope she loves you like I did. Do you remember the concert in the park when we lay on the grass and counted satellites? I do. I wish I didn't. I will be okay. Not now, but I will. Delete. 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 Sometimes healing felt like learning a new alphabet. The letters in the old one still existed inside me, but I had to teach my mouth a different way to speak. The city, without him, was the same city. Buses huffed, couples argued outside restaurants, streetlights made their circles on the pavement like amber rings dropped from the sky. The difference was where my eyes rested. At the farmer's market, the tomato man leaned over his stand and said, "Back again?" with the same cheer. I stood very still, then smiled. "Yes," I said, surprising myself with the steadiness of my voice. "Back again." I chose the ugly tomatoes, the ones that taste best, all scarred and sweet. When I handed him cash, I thought, this is mine, this moment, this purchase, this small decision. I put the tomatoes in a bag and didn't cry until I got to my car. Progress is strange. Maya was in the city too, which meant I moved through our shared map carefully. I took different streets. I stopped going to the coffee place on 3rd on Tuesdays. She didn't try to see me. Every so often I heard things secondhand. She'd taken that new job. She'd cut her hair. She and Rayan had been seen at the bookstore. Each sentence was a small wound. Then wounds scabbed. Then scabs itched. One day, I stopped scratching. When pain dulled, other things returned. The sound of rain on my window, a good joke, the delight of a well-made egg. I don't know when it happened, but one morning, I woke up, and my first thought wasn't about him. It was about the plant in my kitchen I had kept alive. I texted my brother a picture. He sent back, Proud of you, Plant Mom." And I laughed out loud alone in my apartment, in a way that didn't sound sad. That day, a different message pinged. An unknown number, a simple line. "I am starting over, and I owe you nothing, but I want you to have this." I didn't meet him by accident. I pushed it. "I'm sorry." There was no name, but I knew. I stared at the words. They didn't help. They didn't hurt. They were a door closing softly. I took a walk. The city was loud and bright. A kid on a scooter zoomed by, his helmet too big. His mother yelled, "Slow down!" He didn't. I smiled. Life continued, the way oceans refused to stop at the shore. Months later, months that felt like years and moments all at once, I got the call. It was a Wednesday. I had learned to sleep through the night again without bargaining with the dark. I had gone on a date with a man who loved mountain biking and hated olives. He was gentle and kind, and I didn't feel fireworks, but I didn't feel dread either, which felt, in this new arithmetic, like something. My phone lit up with Rayon's name. I stared at it like it was an animal I hadn't seen in a long time. I could let it go to voicemail. I could block, and yet some muscle memory answered. "Hello," I said, and my name wasn't in his first word this time. It was in his breath. "Lena," he said, and just hearing my name in his mouth reopened something I had carefully closed. "What is it?" I asked, guarded without meanness. He exhaled. "This is not an ask," he said, voice thin. "It's not me trying to... It's an apology you don't need and probably don't want. I wanted you to know I know what I did to you. I've started therapy. I'm trying to figure out why I hurt the best thing that ever happened to me." I was quiet a beat too long. I heard traffic on his side. A siren somewhere. I pictured him standing on a sidewalk near a lamppost, staring at his shoes. "How is she?" I asked, surprising us both. He swallowed. "We're not together anymore." Something shifted. Not relief, not revenge, just confirmation that choices have consequences. "Why?" I asked before I could stop myself. "We were the worst part of each other," he said. "At least that's what my therapist says. And I didn't treat her well because I didn't treat myself well. I kept trying to prove something to myself, that I could have more than one life. Turns out you can, but not at the same time." I let the truth of that sit. "I don't hate you," I said, and I didn't. Hate is heavy. I had put it down. But hearing your voice brings back a ghost. And I've worked hard to let her pass through walls. He made a strangled sound that might have been a laugh or a sob. "I won't call again," he said. "I mean it. I hope you get everything you wanted, and then some." I thought of the farmer's market, of the plant in my kitchen, of the new man who had told me his favorite part of the week was Sunday morning light. I thought of the girl I had been, the one who stood on a sidewalk outside a gallery and watched a life she thought was hers walk away. "I will," I said, "and I hope you learn how to be the kind of man who doesn't split himself to feel whole." He inhaled like he'd been underwater and had finally reached the surface. "Goodbye, Lena," he said, and there it was again. My name like an apology. like a prayer. "Goodbye," I said, and hung up. Sometimes healing still asks for ritual. Mine asked for a letter I would never send. I wrote it on paper because I wanted the drag of pen on fiber. The small resistance that makes you mean things differently than when your thumbs fly across glass. "Dear Rayan," it began. Then I scratched out "dear" because the word felt untrue. Then laughed at myself and wrote it again, because politeness can coexist with closure. I told him things he didn't need to know. How for months the grocery store was a battlefield and the toothpaste aisle a landmine. How I started jogging at dawn, because there was a particular corner of my neighborhood that reminded me of the morning we'd found a stray cat and named him Captain and fed him the last of our tuna. How the cat stopped coming. And I took that as a sign that not everything lost returns. I wrote that I had forgiven him, not because he deserved it, but because I did. I said forgiveness wasn't a door back into my life. It was a window I opened so the stale air could leave. I wrote that I still wore the ring he'd given me. Not a promise ring. Nothing like that. Just a simple silver band we'd found at a flea market, on a chain around my neck for a while. And then one day it felt like a weight, and I took it off. And I didn't feel lighter immediately, but over weeks I realized my shoulders had dropped. I wrote that loving him had taught me I could love like sunlight and survive like stone. I folded the letter and put it in a drawer with bus tickets and dried flowers and the photograph of us at the market with tomatoes cupped in our hands like hearts. Later I would throw the photograph away, not with ceremony, just because the drawer needed space. The first time I didn't think of him for an entire day. It was a Tuesday, and the sky was the kind of blue that makes strangers kinder. A barista drew a leaf in my foam and asked if I wanted an extra napkin. I said I was fine and meant it. I met someone months after the call. Not mountain bike man. Someone else, someone with a quieter light. His name was Arav, and he taught high school physics and loved his students with the kind of fierce joy that makes you trust a person. On our third date, under a string of lights behind a small Ethiopian restaurant where the injera came out warm, he said, "I don't need you to be ready. I just need you to be honest." I said, "I am honest. I'm also scared." He nodded like he knew both languages. I didn't tell him about Rayan that night. I told him about books and bicycles. But when I did tell him the story, weeks later, he listened without inserting himself into it. When I finished, he asked, "What did you learn about the way you love?" I said, that I can love with a softness that doesn't have to break me. And he smiled, like that was a correct answer on a test we both knew wasn't graded. We walked to the river. The bridge arched above us. I thought of all the metaphors I could choose, bridges, water, currents, but decided to stand there without them, hands in my pockets, wind in my hair, the present, quietly a present. Sometimes, on Sundays, I still go to the farmer's market. The tomato man says, "Back again?" And I say, "Always." And it's a small joke that belongs just to me. I choose ugly tomatoes. I slice them thick. I salt them and eat them standing over the sink, the way my mother taught me. Juice runs down my wrist. I lick it and laugh. Maya and I never became friends again. That part of the story is simple. We share a city and sometimes, I'm sure, a sidewalk within minutes. It doesn't make me ache anymore. I hope she found a version of herself that doesn't need to take what isn't offered. That's not my job to know. As for Rayan, he has become a fact, not a wound. He is a man who taught me two truths: that I deserved more than being someone's almost, and that choosing yourself is not selfish. It is sacred. He chose her over me. In the echo of that choice, I chose me over him. And then, in the quiet that followed, I chose my life over the story I'd been telling myself. You might be listening to this waiting for the perfect bow, the tidy moral, a neon sign that says, everything happens for a reason. I won't give you that. What I'll give you is what I know. Love isn't a scarce resource, but time is. Give yours to the people who look at you and see a home, not a hallway. Choose the ones who choose you, not after papers are graded and meetings run late, not after they've tested every exit and returned to the first door. Choose the ones who arrive and stay. One day, months from now, maybe years, you'll be standing at your sink eating something simple. Bread with butter, a peach over the trash can, a tomato with salt, and you'll think of the person who couldn't choose you. You'll feel a flicker where the fire used to be. You'll nod to it like an old neighbor, and then you'll go on with the meal that is your life, and you'll be full. I don't know where you are in your story, at the gallery door, on the apartment floor, at the market, but I know you'll walk through it. That's what we do. We walk through. We say our own names like they matter. We find ways to be back again in our own lives. And when someone reaches for you with both hands, with an honesty that doesn't require a translation, you'll know. You'll step forward, not because heartbreak made you harder, but because it taught you how to be whole.